The morning arrived the way it always did, softly. Sunlight slid through the thin white curtains, slow and patient, as if it didn't want to wake anyone too quickly. The house was quiet in that peaceful, lived-in way, the kind of quiet that comes from familiarity, not absence. In the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator filled the space between moments. A clock ticked. Somewhere down the hallway, a floorboard creaked as it cooled from the night. At the dining table, a little girl sat with her legs swinging gently beneath her chair. Her feet didn't quite reach the floor. They never did. She didn't seem to mind. In front of her lay a sheet of paper, a crayon, and the careful attention of a child who wasn't rushing anywhere. She pressed the crayon down slowly, tongue caught lightly between her teeth, drawing letters the best way she knew how. Not perfect. Not neat. But careful. She paused often. Not because she was distracted, but because she was thinking. Across the room, curled up on his favorite spot near the window, the dog opened one eye. He didn't move right away. He just watched. His ears lifted slightly, not alert, not alarmed, just aware. His tail stayed still, resting against the floor, while his eyes followed the small movements of the girl's hands. The house felt warm. Not just from the sunlight, but from something quieter. The girl finished writing and stared at the paper for a long moment. She read it to herself, silently, lips barely moving. Then she folded it once, twice, carefully aligning the edges like it mattered. Because to her, it did. She slid down from the chair and padded across the floor in socks that were a little too big for her feet. The dog lifted his head now, fully, meeting her halfway with calm eyes and a slow, steady breath. She knelt in front of him. "Can you hold this?" she whispered. Her voice was soft, trusting. The dog didn't respond, not in words, but he leaned forward slightly, lowering his head just enough. He had learned that posture over time. Learned that sometimes, being still was the best answer. She reached up, fingers small and careful, and lifted his collar just enough to slide the folded note underneath. Her hands lingered there. Just for a second. She pressed her forehead gently against his neck and breathed out. "Okay," she said quietly. "You can keep it." The dog stayed exactly where he was. Didn't shake. Didn't move. Didn't seem confused. He just sat there, steady and present, as if he understood that this wasn't something to brush away. From the hallway, her mother watched without announcing herself. She leaned against the doorframe, coffee mug warming her hands, observing the scene with a soft smile. There was something about the way her daughter spoke to the dog, not like a pet, but like a listener. Still, she didn't think much of it. Kids did strange, sweet things all the time. The mother turned back toward the kitchen, already shifting her thoughts to the day ahead, schedules, emails, the quiet pressure of responsibility that never really turned off. Later that morning, the dog followed his usual routine. He lay near the window. Moved when the sun shifted. Drank water. Waited. The note stayed tucked beneath his collar the entire time. By afternoon, another one joined it. The girl was more careful this time, glancing down the hallway before kneeling beside him again. Her movements were gentle but deliberate, like she didn't want to draw attention. "Just this one," she whispered. She slid the second note beneath the collar, stacking it neatly with the first. The dog's ears flicked once. That was all. By evening, when the father came home, the house filled with new sounds, keys, footsteps, a tired exhale. He bent down to scratch the dog behind the ears, as he always did. "Hey, buddy," he said softly. "Miss me?" The dog wagged his tail once. Slow. Measured. As the father stood back up, something caught his eye. A sliver of white. Just barely visible beneath the collar. He frowned slightly, crouching down again. "Hold on." He gently lifted the collar, careful not to make the dog uncomfortable. There it was. Paper. Folded. Then another. He paused. The dog looked back at him, calm, steady, not nervous, not guilty. Just present. Did you get into something? The father murmured. The dog didn't move. The mother stepped closer now, curiosity replacing distraction. What is it? She asked. The father slid the notes out slowly, like he was afraid to rush whatever this was. They stood there together, notes in hand. The girl peeked from the hallway, half hidden behind the wall. She didn't say anything. She just watched. The father unfolded the first note. Then the second. Silence settled over the room, thicker than before. The kind of silence that asks you to slow down, whether you want to or not. The mother's smile faded, not into worry, but into something softer. Something deeper. Her breath caught without sound. The father swallowed. Neither of them spoke right away. The dog sat between them, eyes moving gently from one face to the other, tail resting on the floor. Waiting. The girl took a small step forward. Did you read them? She asked. Her voice wasn't scared. Just hopeful. The parents looked at her, then really looked at her, as if seeing something they had missed before. The father knelt down. Yes, he said quietly. We did. The girl nodded, satisfied. I thought he would help, she said. He listens. The dog leaned into her side, pressing his weight gently against her leg. The room felt warmer somehow. Not louder. Not brighter. Just fuller. Whatever was written on those notes wasn't loud or dramatic. But it had landed. And in that moment, standing there together, they all felt it. The quiet things had finally been heard. The dog didn't move for a long time after that. Not because he was told to stay, but because he chose to. The evening light settled into the living room, turning everything a warmer shade of gold. Shadows stretched gently across the floor, slow and unhurried. The kind of light that made the house feel softer than it really was. The dog lay near the couch, head resting on his paws, eyes half open. Watching. The parents sat close together, the notes still folded neatly on the coffee table between them. Neither of them reached for them again. Not yet. Some things needed space. The little girl sat cross-legged on the floor, coloring quietly now. No whispering. No sneaking glances. Just calm, steady movements. Like she had already said what she needed to say, even if it hadn't been out loud. The dog's ears shifted slightly every time she moved. Not alert. Attentive. He had always been like that. From the day they brought him home, too big for his paws, ears that didn't quite listen yet, he had watched her differently than anyone else. Slept closer to her room. Sat nearer to her chair. Followed her movements like they mattered. At first, it felt coincidental. Comforting. Normal. But now, the parents noticed it more. The mother glanced down at him, noticing how his body angled just slightly toward their daughter, even while lying down. His tail was still. His breathing slow. He hasn't left her side, she said quietly. The father nodded. I know. He reached down and rested his hand on the dog's back. Felt the steady warmth there. The calm certainty of a heartbeat that didn't rush. Good boy, he murmured. The dog didn't wag. He didn't need to. Later that night, as the house grew quieter again, the girl padded down the hallway toward her bedroom. Pajamas. Sleepy eyes. The familiar rhythm of bedtime settling in. The dog stood up immediately. No command. No signal. He followed her, not close enough to crowd, not far enough to disappear. Just there. Present. She stopped at her doorway and looked back at him. You can stay, she whispered. He did. She climbed into bed, pulling the blanket up to her chin. The room was dim, lit only by a small lamp that cast a circle of warm light against the wall. Stuffed animals lined the pillow. Familiar. Safe. The dog lay down beside the bed, resting his head on the floor, close enough that she could reach him if she wanted to. And she did. Her fingers curled into the fur behind his ear. "I didn't know how else to say it," she said softly. "But you knew." The dog's eyes closed. Not asleep. Just listening. Down the hall, the parents stood quietly in their own doorway. They hadn't planned to watch. They just hadn't walked away yet. The mother's chest tightened in a way she didn't fully understand. Not sadness. Not fear. Recognition. "She talks to him like that a lot," she whispered. The father exhaled slowly. "I think," he paused, choosing his words carefully. "I think he listens better than we do." They didn't say anything after that. They didn't need to. The next morning unfolded gently. Breakfast. Toast. The soft scrape of chairs. The usual routine resumed, but something had shifted beneath it. Like a quiet current moving under still water. The dog stayed close. When the girl reached for her backpack, he stood up. When she sat at the table, he settled nearby. And when she slipped another folded note into her pocket, glancing at him first, he noticed. Later, while she was getting ready for school, the mother finally picked up the notes again. She unfolded them slowly. Read them again. The words were simple. Childlike. Honest in a way adults often forgot how to be. Not complaints. Not accusations. Just feelings. Things the girl didn't know how to say at dinner, or in passing, or out loud at all. The father read them too. This time, he didn't rush. He sat back, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together, staring at the floor for a long moment afterward. "She gave them to him," he said quietly. "Because she trusts him." The mother nodded. "And because," her voice softened. "Because he stays." The dog lay nearby, head resting on his paws, eyes open. Calm. Steady. As if this had never been a burden. Only a role. By the time the girl came back into the room, backpack on, shoes half tied, the dog was already at her side. Ready. She smiled at him, small, grateful. "Did you keep them safe?" she asked. He looked up at her. Still. Focused. Connected. And in that quiet exchange, something became clear to the parents for the first time. This wasn't about notes. It was about being heard. And the dog had never stopped listening. Curiosity didn't arrive loudly. It didn't interrupt the routine or demand attention. It simply sat down. The father noticed it first, early one morning, while tying his shoes by the front door. The house was still waking up. The girl was finishing breakfast at the table. The dog lay nearby, chin resting on his paws, eyes following her every movement. Not staring. Just present. The father paused, one shoe still untied, watching the way the dog subtly adjusted his position whenever the girl shifted. How his body always angled toward her. How he seemed to anticipate her before she moved. It wasn't new. But now, it felt intentional. He straightened slowly, glancing toward the kitchen where his wife stood rinsing a mug at the sink. "Have you noticed," he said quietly, "how he watches her?" She looked over. She had noticed. She just hadn't named it yet. "Yes," she replied. "I thought I was imagining it." They didn't say anything more, not then. The girl hopped down from her chair, backpack bouncing slightly as she slung it over one shoulder. The dog stood immediately, tail making a single, gentle sweep. "I'll be back," she announced. The dog followed her to the door. As he always did. The house felt different after she left. Quieter, not in sound, but in presence. The dog paced once near the window, then settled near the couch. His ears twitched at every passing car. Not anxious. Just aware. The mother sat down with her laptop but didn't open it right away. Her eyes drifted to the coffee table. The notes were still there. Folded. Waiting. She picked one up, smoothing the creases with her thumb. "I keep thinking," she said slowly, "about how long she's been doing this." The father sat beside her. "Me too." They tried to remember. When had the dog started lingering near the table? When had he begun sleeping closer to their daughter's room? When had she stopped talking as much at dinner? The answers weren't clear. Because none of it had happened all at once. That realization landed quietly and deeply. Later that afternoon, the mother picked the girl up from school. The dog waited by the door, ears lifting at the sound of the car before it even stopped. "She's home," the mother said, half smiling. The dog wagged once. That evening, while the girl worked on homework at the dining table, the parents stayed in the kitchen a little longer than usual. They didn't hover. They just watched. The dog lay beside her chair, eyes half closed, tail relaxed. Every now and then, the girl would glance down at him, not to ask for anything, just to check. And every time, he was there. "He's like her anchor," the mother whispered. The father nodded slowly. "Or her messenger." The words surprised them both. That night, after bedtime, they sat together in the living room. Lamps low. The house wrapped in quiet again. The notes lay open between them now. The mother traced one sentence gently with her finger. "She never says this out loud," she said. "No," the father replied. "She doesn't have to." They sat with that for a while. Then the mother spoke again, softer. "What if she didn't think we'd hear her?" The question hung in the air. The dog lay a few feet away, head resting on the floor, eyes open. Listening. Not to the words, but to the space between them. The parents exchanged a look, one filled not with guilt, but understanding. "We need to do better," the father said. "Yes," the mother agreed. But gently. They didn't want to confront. They didn't want to overwhelm. They wanted to meet their daughter where she was. The dog lifted his head slightly, as if sensing the shift. Something had changed. Not dramatically, but directionally. The next morning, the girl slid another folded note beneath the dog's collar, but hesitated this time. She looked up at her parents. They were already watching her. Smiling. Softly. She paused, then tucked the note away instead. The dog stayed seated, calm and steady. Still her listener. Still her companion. But now, not the only one. And in that moment, curiosity turned into intention. The quiet kind. The kind that listens before it speaks. Closeness doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it waits to be invited. The next few days moved gently, like the house itself was learning a new rhythm. Mornings slowed just a little. Evenings stretched out longer. Not because there was more time, but because fewer moments were being rushed past. The girl noticed first. At breakfast, her mother sat down instead of standing at the counter. She didn't check her phone right away. She asked simple questions, and waited for the answers. At night, her father lingered at the doorway a little longer before turning off the light. He asked how her day felt, not just what she did. The dog noticed too. He watched from his place on the rug, eyes moving gently between them. His tail thumped once, slow and approving, before settling again. One afternoon, sunlight poured through the living room windows, turning the air golden. The girl lay on the floor with her coloring books spread around her. The dog rested beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Her parents sat nearby, not hovering, not distant, just present. The girl colored quietly for a while, then stopped. She looked up. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. Her voice was small, but steady. Her mother turned fully toward her. Her father leaned forward. "We're listening," her mother said. The dog lifted his head. The girl hesitated, fingers twisting the crayon in her hand. She glanced down at the dog, then back at her parents. Sometimes, she said slowly, I don't know where to put my feelings. No one interrupted. No one rushed to fix it. The dog's breathing stayed slow and even. Her father nodded gently. That makes sense, he said. The girl exhaled. It feels loud in my head, she continued. But quiet everywhere else. Her mother felt her chest tighten, not with pain, but recognition. She moved closer, sitting down on the floor across from her daughter. Thank you for telling us, she said softly. The dog shifted slightly, pressing his side against the girl's leg. The girl reached down and rested her hand on his fur, grounding herself. He helps, she said. Because he doesn't make it bigger. The room stayed quiet after that. Not awkward. Safe. That night, the girl didn't write a note. She didn't need to. Instead, her mother sat beside her on the bed, brushing her hair slowly. Each stroke unhurried. The dog lay at the foot of the bed, eyes half closed. You can always talk to us, her mother said gently. The girl nodded. I know, she replied. But sometimes I talk to him first. Her mother smiled, not hurt but grateful. I'm glad you do. Down the hallway, the father leaned against the wall, listening. He hadn't planned to, he just hadn't walked away yet. Later, after the lights were off and the house settled into sleep, the parents sat together in the living room. I think, the father said slowly, we forgot how small the world feels when you're little. The mother nodded. And how big feelings can be, she added. The dog lifted his head at the sound of their voices, then lowered it again once he sensed the calm. The following weekend, they did something simple. They stayed home. No errands. No schedules. No rushing. They played board games at the table. Took a slow walk around the block. Sat on the couch together, the dog stretched out across their feet like he belonged there, because he did. The girl laughed more. Not louder, lighter. At one point, she leaned against her father's side, resting her head on his shoulder. He froze for half a second, surprised, then relaxed into it. The dog watched, tail thumping softly. That evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows lengthened across the floor, the girl reached for the dog's collar, then stopped. She looked at her parents. Smiled. No today, she said. The dog stayed exactly where he was. Still her anchor. Still her listener. But now, so were they. And in that quiet shift, the house felt different. Not perfect. But closer. Some truths don't arrive all at once. They rise slowly, like something long held beneath still water. The parents didn't sit the girl down. They didn't ask heavy questions. They simply stayed. And in staying, small things began to surface on their own. It started with silence. Not the empty kind, but the thoughtful kind. One evening, the girl sat at the kitchen counter while her mother chopped vegetables for dinner. The rhythm of the knife was steady. Familiar. Comforting. The dog lay at her feet, eyes following the motion of the girl's legs swinging gently against the cabinet. The girl watched her mother for a while, then spoke. Do grown-ups get lonely? She asked. The knife paused. Just for a second. Her mother didn't turn right away. She finished the cut she was making, set the knife down carefully, and then looked at her daughter. Sometimes, she answered honestly. Yes. The girl nodded, like that confirmed something she'd been holding. I think, sometimes you and Dad are lonely together. The words were quiet. Not accusing. Just observed. The dog's ears lifted slightly. The mother swallowed. That's a very thoughtful thing to notice, she said softly. The girl shrugged, eyes on the counter. I don't think you mean to be, she added quickly. You're just busy. The mother reached out and rested her hand over her daughter's. You're right, she said. We are busy. She squeezed gently. And sometimes we forget to slow down. From the doorway, the father listened. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but he didn't move away either. Later that night, he sat beside the girl on the couch while the dog lay stretched across the rug. "What made you think that?" he asked gently. The girl traced patterns into the fabric of the cushion with her finger. "You don't laugh the same way you used to," she said. "But he does." She nodded toward the dog. The father's chest tightened, not with pain, but clarity. "You're very observant," he said quietly. The dog thumped his tail once, slow and reassuring. That night, after the girl was asleep, the parents sat together in the dim living room. Lamps low. The house breathing around them. "She's been carrying more than we realized," the mother said. The father nodded. "And giving it to him," he replied, glancing toward the dog sleeping nearby. "Because she didn't want to give it to us." The dog shifted slightly in his sleep, then settled again. Not burdened. Trusted. The next day, the girl found her old notebook tucked beneath her bed. Pages filled with drawings. Scribbles. Words she'd written and forgotten. She carried it into the living room and sat beside the dog. He lifted his head. She flipped through the pages slowly. "These were for him," she said softly. The parents looked up. "Some of them were," she clarified. "Before I knew how to write small enough." The mother's eyes filled, not with tears, but warmth. The girl leaned into the dog's side. "I didn't want you to feel sad," she said quietly. "So I told him." The dog stayed still. Solid. Present. The father moved closer, sitting down on the floor across from her. "Next time," he said gently, "you can tell us too." The girl considered this. "I know," she said. "But I needed practice." The words landed gently and deeply. Practice. That's what the notes had been. Not secrets. Rehearsals. The dog hadn't been hiding anything. He had been holding space. That evening, the parents took a walk together after dinner. Not long. Not far. Just enough to talk. They spoke about small things at first, schedules, errands, then about bigger ones. How tired they'd been. How disconnected without meaning to be. Back at home, the girl waited on the couch with the dog curled beside her. When they returned, she looked up. "You okay?" she asked. The mother smiled and sat down beside her. "Yes," she said. "We are." The dog rested his head on the girl's knee. Still her anchor. But now, the truth was beginning to rise. And no one was rushing it back down. The reveal didn't come with drama. No raised voices. No sudden tears. No single moment where everything broke open. It arrived quietly, the way the notes always had. It was a Sunday afternoon. The kind that felt suspended in time. Sunlight drifted through the living room windows, warm and unhurried, turning the dust in the air into something almost beautiful. The girl sat at the dining table, drawing again, not notes this time, just pictures. White skies. A house. A dog that was a little bigger than real life. The dog lay nearby, chin on his paws, eyes half closed. The parents were together on the couch, close enough that their shoulders touched. Not intentionally. Not accidentally. Just, naturally. The mother reached for the small stack of notes one more time. Not because she needed answers, but because she wanted to understand. She unfolded one slowly. Then another. The father leaned in, reading along. They didn't speak at first. They didn't need to. The notes weren't sad. That was the surprising part. They were honest, gentle, and filled with love that didn't know where else to go. Things like, "I don't want you to be tired all the time. I like it when we sit together. I think he keeps my words safe." The father closed his eyes. Just for a moment. When he opened them, his voice was steady, but softer than usual. "She wasn't telling us what we were doing wrong," he said. "She was telling us what she missed." The mother nodded. "And what she values," she added. Across the room, the girl glanced up. "Are you reading them again?" she asked. Yes, her mother replied gently. Would you like to sit with us? The girl hesitated, then nodded. She slid off her chair and crossed the room. The dog stood immediately, walking beside her without rushing. They sat together on the couch. The girl tucked her legs under herself. The dog settled at her feet, leaning just slightly against her shin. The mother held one note between her fingers. Can you tell us about this one? She asked. The girl leaned forward to look. Oh, she said. That one was when you were both working late. The parents exchanged a glance. We were, the father said quietly. I didn't want to interrupt, the girl explained. So I told him instead. She rested her hand on the dog's head. He didn't mind. The dog's tail thumped once. Slow. Content. The mother's eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with something fuller. Thank you for trusting us now, she said. The girl shrugged gently. I always trusted you, she replied. I just didn't want to make things heavy. The words landed softly, and completely. The father exhaled, the tension he hadn't realized he was holding finally easing. You never did, he said. You helped us see. They sat there for a long time after that. No rush. No need to fill the space. The dog remained between them, not as a messenger anymore, but as a witness. A quiet bridge that had already done its work. As the afternoon faded into evening, the light shifted again. The house took on deeper shadows, warmer tones. The girl leaned her head against her mother's side. The father rested his hand gently on the dog's back. And in that stillness, something softened completely. Not just understanding, but forgiveness. Not for mistakes, but for moments missed. The dog lifted his head and looked at each of them in turn. Calm. Steady. As if to say, you're here now. And that was enough. By now, the notes no longer felt like secrets. They felt like echoes. Soft reminders of a conversation that had already begun and didn't need to be repeated in the same way. Still, one note remained. It wasn't tucked under the dog's collar anymore. It sat alone on the coffee table, folded smaller than the others, corners worn from being handled too many times. The girl had written it weeks ago. And then, she had hesitated. The house was quiet that evening. Not empty. Not heavy. Just calm. The dog lay near the window, watching the sky deepen into shades of blue and gray. Every now and then, his tail moved gently against the floor, responding to sounds only he seemed to notice. The girl stood near the coffee table, fingers hovering over the last note. The parents watched her not with expectation, but with patience. She picked it up. Sat down on the rug. The dog turned toward her immediately, rising and walking over, settling beside her with practiced ease. This one, she said softly, holding the note, was the first one. The room felt still. The father leaned forward slightly. You don't have to read it, he said. Unless you want to. She nodded. I want to. She unfolded the paper slowly. The writing was uneven and smaller than the others, as if she had been unsure where to begin. She read aloud, voice steady but quiet. I wrote that I didn't want you to stop being happy, she said. And that sometimes I thought it was my fault when things felt quiet. The words didn't sting. They settled. The mother moved closer, sitting down beside her. Oh, sweetheart, she whispered. The girl continued. I told him to keep it safe because I didn't know if I was allowed to say it. The dog leaned his weight gently into her side. The father's eyes softened, not with sadness, but with understanding that reached backward in time. You were always allowed, he said. We just didn't say it enough. The girl folded the note again and placed it on the table. The dog didn't move. Didn't reach for it. His job was done. Or maybe, it never was a job at all. Later that night, after bedtime, the parents sat together again. I keep thinking, the mother said quietly, about how much he carried. The father shook his head gently. I think he just made room. They both looked toward the dog, asleep nearby. His chest rose and fell slowly. Peacefully. He hadn't been protecting secrets. He had been protecting a voice. The next morning, the girl woke early and padded into the living room. Sunlight was just beginning to spill across the floor. The dog followed her. She reached up and unfastened his collar. Not to hide anything. Just to adjust it. She slid the last folded note out. Looked at it. Then placed it carefully in a small wooden box on the shelf, beside old drawings and keepsakes. "Thank you," she whispered to the dog. He sat beside her. Still. Connected. When the parents entered the room, they saw the empty collar and the box. The mother smiled. The father knelt down. "No more notes?" he asked gently. The girl shook her head. "I think he gave them back to you," she said. The dog wagged his tail once. Slow. Certain. They all stood there together for a moment. No urgency. No unfinished business. Just a quiet understanding of what had passed between them. What the dog had really been holding was never paper. It was space. Trust. Time. And now they were all holding it together. The house didn't change overnight. Not in the way movies pretend it does, with sudden laughter filling every corner, or problems dissolving like they were never real. What changed was how the house held them. Morning light still came through the same windows. The floors still creaked in the same places. The clock still ticked at the same steady pace. But now, those sounds felt shared. The girl woke up early that morning, before her alarm. She lay still for a moment, listening. The house breathed around her, pipes humming softly, distant traffic, the quiet comfort of being inside something familiar. She sat up and smiled. Not because something exciting was about to happen, but because nothing felt heavy. She padded out of her room, careful not to make noise, and found the dog already awake, sitting near the hallway window like he always did. He turned his head as soon as he sensed her. Their eyes met. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She sat down beside him, leaning her back against the wall, knees pulled to her chest. The dog shifted closer, his shoulder pressing gently into her side. They watched the morning arrive together. This time, there was nothing to pass along. Nothing to carry. Nothing to keep safe. And somehow, that felt just right. A little later, the parents joined them. No rush. No tight schedules pulling them in different directions. The father made coffee. The mother started breakfast. The sounds blended into something soft and grounding. The girl sat at the table, swinging her legs like she always had, but now her parents noticed. Noticed the small things. The way she hummed when she felt calm. The way she paused before speaking, choosing her words carefully. The way she looked at them, checking, connecting. The dog lay nearby, his place unchanged, his presence steady. "You sleep okay?" the father asked gently. She nodded. "Yeah," she said. "I had a quiet dream." The mother smiled. "I like those," she replied. They ate together. Not long. Not perfectly. Just together. After breakfast, they did something simple. They sat on the couch. No phones. No background noise. Just them. The girl leaned against her mother's side. The father rested his arm along the back of the couch. The dog stretched out across their feet, claiming the space like he always had. The girl traced slow circles on the dog's fur with her fingers. "He still listens," she said quietly. Her father smiled. "So do we." She looked up at him, really looked, then nodded. "I know." Later that afternoon, they went for a walk. Not far. Just around the neighborhood. The dog walked between them, leash loose, tail moving in slow, content sweeps. Leaves crunched under their feet. A breeze moved through the trees. The girl talked about school. About a drawing she wanted to finish. About a story she wanted to write someday. Her parents listened. Not multitasking. Not half present. Listening. The dog glanced back at her every few steps, as if checking that the rhythm was still right. When they returned home, the sun was lower, casting long shadows across the floor. The girl pulled the small wooden box down from the shelf. She opened it carefully. Inside were drawings, old notes, little pieces of who she had been becoming. She didn't add anything new. She just closed it gently and slid it back into place. That chapter felt complete. That evening, as bedtime approached, the father read a story aloud. His voice was calm, steady, a little slower than usual. The girl lay in bed, eyes heavy, the dog curled on the rug beside her. Her mother sat on the edge of the bed, brushing her hair the way she had when she was younger. "Can I tell you something?" the girl asked sleepily. "Always," her mother replied. "I think I don't need him to carry things anymore," she said, glancing toward the dog. The dog didn't stir. He didn't need reassurance. Her mother nodded. "That makes sense," she said. "But he can still stay." The girl smiled. "I want him to." Down the hallway later, the parents stood quietly for a moment after turning out the light. The father exhaled slowly. "I keep thinking about how close we came to missing it," he said. The mother nodded. "But we didn't," she replied. "Because she found a way to speak." "And because he knew how to listen," the father added, glancing toward the dog lying just outside the room. The house settled into sleep. Deep. Restful. Unrushed. Days passed. Then weeks. Life returned to its normal pace, work, school, responsibilities, but something underneath stayed different. Dinner conversations lasted longer. Silences felt safer. The girl laughed more freely. And when she grew quiet, her parents noticed. One evening, as they all sat together watching the last light fade from the windows, the girl turned to the dog and wrapped her arms around his neck. "You did good," she whispered. The dog wagged his tail once. Slow. Certain. From that day on, the collar stayed empty. No notes tucked beneath it. No folded paper hidden away. It didn't need to carry words anymore. Because the words had found their way home. The dog still stayed close. Still listened. Still watched. But now, he wasn't the bridge. He was simply part of the circle. And in that warm, quiet house, filled with ordinary sounds and shared moments, everything finally found its place. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But gently. Exactly the way it was always meant to.